Do you struggle with meal planning? Maybe you're new to home cooking and you just have no idea where to start. Well, in this video, I am here to help you to be able to take the stress out of home cooking so that it can just be something that you and your family can enjoy. There's a few different topics I'm going to be discussing today in order to help you make home cooking something that is an enjoyable experience. And I will try to remember to leave timestamps below in the description to tell you where those different topics are in the video. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, we talk about all things homesteading, homemaking, and just our journey to a slower, more simple life. Today's video, I've been kind of thinking about this topic for a little while now, and I feel like it's important to try to give out this kind of information. Of course, in kind of the circles I follow, I see a lot of great homemade recipes and things like that, but I don't see as much of helping find the process of, for people that may be new to making food from scratch, how to really help them integrate it into their lifestyle, or even people who have been doing it for a while that might have some stress that comes along with it because their routine is kind of not quite what it could be. And although I'm on the younger side compared to a lot of people, even though I don't feel very young, I have quite a bit of experience with home cooking and everything that involves. I grew up with home cooked meals and I've been making home cooked meals pretty much every single meal. I don't go out to eat almost ever. Maybe I get something taken like 4 times a year maybe. I really don't do much of that. And that's not to gloat or brag, but it is to show that it is possible, and I don't find it stressful because I got my routines down and I know what I'm doing. I'm kind of experienced in it. So that's really why I want to talk about it, because I think some of the people that homesteader channels or slower living channels don't necessarily think about, but I think it's important to reach to the most, might be the people that have less experience with it. And I want to try to do something to make it an easy transition, an easy experience, something that doesn't add more stress than trying to navigate through. Intros aside, let's talk about my first point. So one of the first stressors that I think people might have when they may be new to making their own meals is not feeling like they have a very well-rounded recipe arsenal, if you will, or just not knowing what to make. And of course, this would be stressful because how are you going to make food from scratch for your meals if you have no concept of what you even want to make? But luckily, this is one of the things that has the easiest solutions, because as people, we all have to eat food every day. That in itself is not going to be a new experience for us. It just might be adjusting slightly what it is we're eating. With the things we see online, we might feel obligated to have to make these gourmet type meals if we're cooking them ourselves, something fancy or something you've never heard before, or really go all out. But this is simply not true. It is also not true that we need tons of variety in the meals we're eating throughout the week. Of course, ideally we want to be well-rounded with what we're eating. We want to get enough protein and enough of our different vitamins, but truth be told, most people don't get that in their diets in general. And that might sound kind of discouraging, but in a way it can be encouraging, because you probably, whatever diet you have now, are not getting exactly what you need, most likely, and home cooking your meals just gives you more opportunity to be more specific about what you may need for you personally. Bodies can be very, very different from each other, depending on a lot of factors, depending on your personal biological makeup. But to kind of return to the main point, you don't need 14 different recipes to make sure you don't repeat anything within like a certain amount of time. You can keep it very, very simple, especially to start out. A good way to look at things maybe to start out is look at what you are eating now. What are you getting when you get your takeout, or what kind of store-bought microwave meals are you getting? How can we convert that into its homemade counterpart? And truth be told, I can pretty much guarantee that it won't be a difficult transition. It's just about learning how to go about it, which we will get into further in the topics to come up. In a previous video, for example, I made 3 typical convenience food meals. I did macaroni, ramen, and pizza, which is what I think of when I think of a lot of, standard American, maybe younger college student things they might be eating. But I did homemade versions of them, which not only is healthier, I know what's going into it, it was actually cheaper, which is something obviously needs to be considered. And it didn't take that much time. I will link that video if you're interested in that. But think about what those foods are for you. They could be definitely different. And don't feel like you need to make the switch all overnight. Just start with figuring out how to do that one meal that you really love. And another tip for that as well, as I was saying, you don't need to have tons and tons of variety. Think of your basics. I'm a meat eater, so maybe a typical dinner would be a meat with a side of starch and a side of veggies. Now that opens up a lot of playing room. The meat could be chicken, could be fish, could be beef. Beef could be steak or hamburger. My starch could be rice, potato, sweet potato, squash. My veggies could be carrots, broccoli, peas. I could really go on. And so with that one basic concept of meat, starch, veggie, I think within all those things I just said, I couldn't tell you how many different things you could mix and match together. You could have a day of the week where you did a chicken with a side of mashed potato and carrots, and then a couple days later you could do a steak with a side of rice and broccoli. It really doesn't need to be that complicated. Hopefully that gives you a very good starting place. My next tip of advice is for somebody who might be a little bit more advanced, maybe you have some recipes down, is to start getting a hold of how to keep the right things stocked. A lot of us in our kitchens do have some storage, maybe some more or less than others, and that's okay. But something that you will find when you are making recipes homemade instead of going to the store and buying things that are already made to go for you is you'll want to have things on hand. Something that definitely adds stress to people is when they feel as if they have to go to the store all the time to be able to get ingredients, or maybe they're following along with new recipes and they come to something and they don't have it on hand and it throws everything off. And of course that would be annoying. That would be super annoying for me too. But that doesn't have to be how you operate. When we have kind of our working pantries and working fridges and things like that, we can keep things on hand that we may need. For example, if you know you use a lot of a certain spice, maybe you do a lot of Indian cuisine or something like that, you'll probably always want to have ginger on hand. You won't have to want to be reading in on a new recipe and seeing ginger and not being able to find it and then throwing your hands up. I think this is a good next step after you are starting to establish what meals you like. Then you know what goes in those meals and you know what you can keep on hand to make sure if you want to make something from your little arsenal kit that you will have it and you won't have to worry about having to go to the store, the time it takes to do that, when you can fit that into your schedule. Maybe it's stressful to lug your kids along. Maybe it's stressful because you might not even know if you have the money at that time when you'll want to go to the store. If you are a list maker or you like to make lists, maybe you'll even want to put on the inside of a cupboard or something like that a list of things to make sure that you always have on hand to kind of remind you that when you're low on it, you want to put it on the grocery list. And knowing what things you want to keep in stock will very much help you with the next tip I'm going to talk about, and that is figuring out your way of meal planning. So meal planning will look different for everyone, and it should look different for everyone. There truly is no correct way to meal plan, but you will see lots of different ways to do it online. I'm going to talk about a few of the most common ones just to get your brain rolling, get you thinking about what might work best for you, how you operate, your family, etc. Probably the most common way to meal plan is just for the week ahead. So maybe on Saturday or Sunday night, you will sit down and think about what the meals are that you want the week ahead. So typically this involves a piece of paper with the days of the week and just kind of writing what you want to be able to prepare for meals on these certain days. Now this can or cannot tie into exactly how frequently you want to go to the store. I'd say it's probably typical for somebody to meal plan for the week ahead and also go grocery shopping maybe once a week to kind of go in unison with your planning and preparing by stocking up. But just so you know, these don't necessarily have to coordinate in that way. You could meal plan weekly but only go to the store monthly, or vice versa. But so say you are planning weekly, you write down every meal that you will want to make for the week. Then from those meals, you can make a list of what you need, and anything that you don't have ready to go in your stock in your pantry, you can go and get at whatever store you like to go to. Now this way is just fine. It works for a lot of people. It keeps things decently easy to manage since you will probably be writing down your meal plan for the week and grocery shopping the same day every week probably. But if you wanted to take a different approach, you can also do monthly meal planning. And this might sound absolutely crazy to some, but I have seen people do it and it works really well for them. People will think about the whole month ahead and plan every single meal, what they're going to have every single day of the month. And then when you do this, you can also quite easily go and get all your groceries for the month if that's something you can do with the way your income flow works. Now, who would this work best for? Probably somebody who loves to plan, of course, and maybe somebody who doesn't want to take a little bit of time every, week and would rather do a bigger shop all at once and only have to go once a month, only have to really think about it once a month. It's all like planned ahead for you for a very long time. And you may think, how is this even possible to do? That might make sense for something like keeping flour on hand or things like that. But what about the things that go bad, like your fruit or even your milk or anything like that? Well, you definitely can do it. It's a little different. It might be something you're not used to. I know people who buy frozen berries, for example. Berries are a great treat to have, great snack for kids. But instead of buying, say, your box of strawberries fresh in the store, you can buy frozen strawberries and then thaw them out as needed for a snack. Of course, this is a different texture and you might not like it, and that's fine. You don't have to do it this way. I don't do it this way. I'll get into what I do in just a moment. But like I said before, if you really like the other points about what strategizing this way could do for your life, then it might be fine with you. You might not mind that it's a little bit mushy. And you can also, of course, freeze things like milk and bread, all kinds of things you can freeze and then thaw out when you're ready to use it. Now, what do? I do something that I haven't really seen anybody else talk about as a strategy. I don't really know if anybody would call it a strategy. It might not seem like one at first. It might seem a little flying by the seat of your pants. But I actually just meal plan for the next day. I kind of daily meal plan. Now, I will say this is very different than just kind of winging it the day of. That is something I wouldn't really recommend for anybody. That is how you get into that stressful territory where you've been maybe working all day or with the kids all day or both, or who knows what you've been doing, and then it's dinner time and you have no idea what's going on. That I don't think anybody would recommend. But I am a planner. I like to keep a daily list that I work on the night before for my next day, and part of that is the meal. And this works so incredibly well for me. I would definitely consider myself a planner, but I also like to not feel locked into things too much. I like to kind of go with the flow. And so why just thinking about it the night before works so well is because I can kind of establish where I'm at on a day-to-day basis with everything. Say, for example, if I make a roast chicken dinner Monday night, I can then kind of see where we're at as far as leftovers go once that meal is over in the evening, once I've done the dishes, put the leftovers away. And I might see that there's so many leftovers that we're just gonna have leftovers for the next night. This helps me to not have food waste, which is something you definitely want to avoid. Nobody wants to be throwing away perfectly good food. But this also gives me enough time, plenty of time to know what I want to take out for anything to thaw out the night before or prepare a certain way. Such as last evening, I decided that I was gonna do beans and hot dogs for today for dinner. So I took out my hot dogs to thaw, and I also put my beans in water to soak. And so things were all prepped and ready to go for today. No stress at all. So I definitely recommend that approach. That would be for somebody though that, like I've said, has kind of established their pantry stock, what they're keeping on hand, really has a good understanding of things they need for certain recipes, what things they like to keep on hand. Because definitely planning this way, if you don't really know all the things that you need or you don't really know what you have, you may run into that issue like I talked about before of not having something that you kind of need to make the recipe work. So I definitely keep a very close eye on what I have in my food storage. And if you're wondering exactly how I personally get my groceries at this time, I probably go to the grocery store 2 to 3 times a month, and I get all my meat from a meat source that gets it from local farms, and I order from them about every month and a half. And I do try to prioritize the money going into getting things that can be bought in bulk, such as flour and sugar. I definitely go for the big things of it, opposed to getting maybe 5 pounds every week, because that does cost more and adds up when you start making things more from scratch. So like I was saying, for meal planning, it is important to keep things on hand and know what you have. And one of the best ways to get into that habit of doing that is to keep things organized. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next point. So keeping things organized, I'm sure we're all used to hearing that and knowing that that's something that we have to do, even though it can be quite a stressful thing to try to keep up with everything and keep it organized. But I am here to tell you that when it comes to food, it doesn't have to be something that adds stress to your plate. When it comes to food organization, there's a few things I like to keep in mind. Make sure everything has a home that it belongs to. If this is new for you, maybe you truly don't have a specific place yet for things that you might use in home cooking because you haven't really done it before. So decide where you want things to go so you know where to check for them. And try to keep things in one space as much as possible. Some little exceptions, of course, would be having your salt and pepper storage different than your salt and pepper shaker, of course. And an example I have is I do keep some brown sugar in a small container on the coffee bar, where I also have bigger brown sugar storage in the baking section. That's another tip, is I like to keep things that are kind of baking centered together, whereas cooking centered together. If you have certain things that you do on a very consistent basis, maybe you have, your oatmeals or granolas all the time, you might want to keep those kinds of things together as well. It doesn't have to be like a Pinterest board. It doesn't have to be, perfectly labeled with the best label maker or anything like that. I constantly should be vacuuming out my kind of baking pantry area because it's messy, but I don't do that. You can probably be better than me with that if you want to. Another little tip that I have specifically is when it comes to organizing the fridge. We talked a little bit about earlier food waste, and there's very few things that, kind of hurt me internally more than having to get rid of food that was perfectly good, but we just didn't get to use in time. I've definitely seen this a lot at friends' houses growing up, is things, the way they were stored really seemed that they got forgotten about and things ended up being thrown away. Or even I've even seen this in my own home a couple times, is not being able to find something, and so you get a new version of it and you never used up the part you had before. So with the good old fridge specifically, typically we all have our side pockets of the fridge, and this is where a lot of people like to put things like condiments. But I would challenge this. I would definitely challenge this, because condiments are something we go for not out of a whim or when we are feeling peckish and opening up the fridge looking for a snack. I think very few people probably open up the fridge, see the mustard they have there, and then take a little glug of mustard. Things like that we intentionally go to for certain reasons. This includes ketchup, mustard, jams and jellies, hot sauce, all kinds of stuff like that. I personally store those things in the bottom parts that is kind of hard to see what's in there and makes things easy to forget about. A lot of people like to store their veggies or even their fruits and stuff in there, and I find that leads into people kind of forgetting about them and not gravitating toward it when they're looking for snacks. How many times can we say that we had the great idea for a healthy new snack? Maybe it is dipping some broccoli in some kind of hummus, or making those fancy pepper boats that we saw on Pinterest. We buy the broccoli, we buy the peppers, and we stick it in the fridge and we do not touch it. Maybe when we open the fridge when we're peckish, we go for the cheese sticks or something like that that's more up front and center. So basically what I'm saying is optimize your fridge. I don't have the perfect way for you to do it, but I would definitely say put things that you want to be seen and want to be used front and center, as well as things you know you use every day. In my case, I use maple syrup in my coffee every day, so that is right on the side, easy for me to grab. And then tuck the things away that, one, last a very long time, and two, are kind of the things that you know where they are when you want them. You will really be surprised what a big difference this can make. Finally, the last thing to discuss today is going to be meal prepping. You probably have heard of this and seen the concept, I'm sure, and it can be a really useful tool when you are a home-cooked kind of person. We all have busy lives in our own way, and it can be difficult for people to find the time every single day to make something completely from scratch. That's completely understandable. Even somebody that it may be easier for, like myself, there's definitely times where you don't want to have to do that. Maybe somebody is sick in the family, maybe you're sick, maybe there's some kind of life event happening, like having a baby or having your house remodeled. That makes things be a little different than usual, throws your routine off already. And when something like that happens, you don't want to feel stuck to have to make certain decisions that maybe you don't want to make. Maybe you've been doing a really good job and feeling really successful in making things from scratch. And so that's when having something meal prepped can really come in handy. And meal prepping doesn't have to just be for unseen events. You can meal prep on a weekly basis for your week ahead if that's what works for you, so that you only have one day of doing a lot of cooking and then the rest of the day is easy peasy. But pretty much anything you can think of, at least anything I can think of, you can make it be a meal to prep ahead of time in order to eat it later. Meat can all be refrozen once it's cooked. You see for sale in stores things like ready to eat lasagnas and of course pizzas and stuff like that that are processed in factories, and you can bring them home and have it be like easy meal. You can make that yourself. You can make the lasagna and pizza yourself and then freeze it to then use on days you don't want to really cook. I know a lot of people like to make maybe ready to go oats in the morning, and you can get containers, you can get mason jars, put yogurt, your oats, your fruit, and prep it for the whole week ahead for you to take to work with you or anything like that. If you're struggling because cooking just might not be your favorite thing in the world, or you just maybe have a really crazy life that things can be very different day to day, this could work really well for you. Because truthfully, depending on how much time you really want to give it, you could meal prep for a very, very extended amount of time. I mean, depending on the freezer space you have as well, but potentially you truly could make a bunch of things and be able to use that for as long as you can make them for, really. Of course, you don't want to leave things in the freezer too long because it does have the risk of getting like freezer burnt, but usually you don't have to worry about that if it's stored properly until like over a year of it being in the freezer. So that's definitely something I would recommend you to explore. So with that, let's get into the recap and final thoughts. One, and probably the thing to focus on if you're brand new, is finding your recipes. What do you want to make? What is the food and the meals you want to eat and have for your family? Some of the best and easiest ways to start is just looking at what your diet is now and going from there, and knowing that it doesn't have to be fancy and it doesn't have to be that diverse. It can be very, very simple. Once we know that, then we want to focus on making sure we keep things stocked so that when we have these recipes, we know we have the ingredients to make them. You can keep different lists, that remind you of the things you want to make sure are in certain pantry areas, even on the fridge. And when looking at new recipes, try to not go ahead and start it until you look over all the ingredients and know if you have what you need, but also know that you don't necessarily have to use everything that it says to use. You can play with it for sure. Then we're gonna want to plan out our meals, and we can do that in whatever way works best for you. We know what kind of meals we like. We know what kind of things goes into making those meals. Now we just need to know when we're gonna make them. Do you like to keep things on a more day-to-day basis like myself, or are you somebody that really likes to plan ahead? Through this, we will start establishing our own routines of days we make grocery lists, days we go shopping, and things will start falling into place. As we start getting all these routines together, we will start getting a pantry and food storage put together. We will need to make sure we keep this organized in order to keep stress off ourselves. We can do this by making sure everything has its own place to be, keeping things together that you may use together more frequently, knowing the areas in the kitchen to look when you are seeing what you're getting low on, what you need to go get more of, and optimizing certain areas like your fridge or even your cupboards by putting the things you really want to make sure get eaten up and used first out in the open, easy for you to see when you are maybe just peckish and not sure what you're looking for, while putting the things that you will know where to get when you need it or really last a long time in those more hidden places. And finally, when we're really starting to figure things out, when we know the kinds of food we like, we have the storage put together, we're kind of organized, then we can look into meal prepping so that we know that if anything happens, or just to take the stress off of our routine day-to-day of making food, we have an easier way to do it. We have something put away that we can choose to use for our convenience, but we know exactly what it is because we made it. And those are my tips for those who want to make home cooking a little less stressful in their life. I really hope this video can be helpful to anybody out there. I really try to think about all kinds of different people when I'm thinking about certain topics, because one of my real goals is I want to help people that may be kind of on the outskirts of maybe the homesteading and homemaking lifestyle for whatever reason, maybe because they're just learning about it, or maybe something about the way their life is makes them feel like they can't be fully in the community for some reason. I really want to reach kind of people like that, as well as people who are already more involved, because I do things like this because I find it important. I really am passionate about it, and not just for myself, but I think for community and society as a whole. And I want to make these kinds of ideas accessible to more people. And so I definitely try to keep in mind people that I may have seen in my life over years, maybe people kind of my age, like college kids, or maybe older people that things are harder to do, maybe people that at the current time have quite demanding careers. I don't want these people to be ostracized or to be pushed away from these kinds of movements. I want them to feel like they can be included and that there's starting points and there's chance for growth. I mean, we all start somewhere and we all don't have to end up in the same destination either. So before I ramble too much, it's just food is very important. Food is something we all should care about, and I hope this can help you to kind of think about your food more and give you a chance to really take claim over your food, because I think there's some real freedom to be found in that. If you like this kind of video and would like to see more, please consider subscribing so that you can join this community of like-minded folk. At this time, I'm uploading every single Monday, and that is what I see myself doing for the near future. So I'd love it if you tune in for the next video. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye!